What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, May 25th, 2017. We're almost on top of summer. Wow, that's amazing here. And we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, his hand hovering over that telephone, ready to swoop on down, put you on the air with your comments and questions about everything that we're talking about. We are still seeing a lot of desperation on the part of the deep state, the elites, the establishment, whatever name you want to put on them, regarding this issue over Seth Rich. And it's actually starting to attract a lot of attention around the world. Everybody's paying attention because this thing just is so incredibly weird here. And a lot of attention is focusing on Sean Hannity because apparently there was this group, this media watchdog group that was basically on Fox News, putting pressure on Fox News and the advertisers over Sean Hannity's reporting on Seth Rich being the DNC leaker, and everybody is trying to make that story go away. They're saying it's a conspiracy theory. It's already discredited. Don't believe the thing you said. We know it was the Russians, even though we can't prove it. And a lot of people were wondering if Sean Hannity might actually fade away like Bill O'Reilly did, but Fox News is saying no, he is staying. His show is secure, but he has backed off from the story. And it's a very obvious, very public example of how the corporate media is, in fact, being controlled by political interests. And every time they do something like this that is that overt, that the public actually sees, it just continues to erode the credibility of the corporate media and the government. There are only so many times you can lie and get caught at it before people just automatically say, we're not going to listen anymore. And in fact, what they did to Sean Hannity is a reminder of that saying we have on a coffee cup in the online store. The fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it, and that's exactly what happened. Sean Hannity was reporting on a story that had legs to it, and they shut him down. And everybody saw it happen. Now, a lot of attention is continuing to focus on Brad Bauman, who is the designated spokesperson for the Rich family. The Rich family, for the most part, aren't saying anything. Obviously, a lot of pressure has been brought to bear on them to not make a stink about this case, to not demand there actually be a factual investigation. And it turns out Brad Bauman is connected to the Democratic propaganda czar David Brock. And this is the latest discovery in a long line of revelations showing that the Democratic National Committee is directly involved in the cover-up of the Seth Rich case. Now, this heavy-handed corporate media attack on anybody talking about this extended beyond Fox News. Apparently, Twitter suspended WorldNet Daily's account from posting over a tweet where Donna Brazile warned off the private eye on the Seth Rich murder, which is an established fact. It did happen. And Twitter shut off WorldNet Daily for tweeting it. So obviously they are very, very much afraid of that. Now, somebody put up a petition at the White House petition website calling for a full investigation on Seth Rich. I don't know that having the government investigate this case is going to produce any results. It's just another opportunity to polish up the lies. Interestingly enough, when I signed the petition and I got the confirmation email, the click to confirm link would not work. So already they're putting up roadblocks. They're afraid of this one. They are really, really afraid of this one. Now, getting on over into London, and we're still seeing the aftermath of this Manchester bombing terror attack, and we're still not exactly sure what it was all about. But Theresa May has basically launched this massive deployment of soldiers all over the streets. People are saying it looks like she's declared martial law. And, of course, this is quite at odds with David Cameron, who tried to take a lower-key response to this sort of thing. But the soldiers are out there, and everybody's saying, boy, it looks like the streets back during World War II. And Theresa May appears to be trying to use this to bolster her campaign for the upcoming snap election. And she's out there campaigning, saying that she's strong and stable. That's her motto. That's her slogan. In fact, that's pretty much all that she's saying. And if, in fact, she's trying to capitalize on the bombing to boost her electability, it appears to be backfiring, because all over London, people are putting up signs that say, "Strong and stable, my rear end." It's not exactly what it says, but you get the gist of it. And so it looks like it's backfiring on her. A lot of people are saying the fact that the bombing actually happened shows that the government isn't really able to do anything about this. We even had the BBC out the other day saying, you might as well get used to it. You know, we're never going to be able to stop this entirely, so just accept the bombings as a part of, living in a modern civilized society here. Now, more and more is coming out about the bomber. And before we talk about that, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And by the way, if you're listening on an on-air affiliate, feel free to join the show by calling 800-313-9443. Would love to hear from some of you out there. So we're looking at this Manchester bomber, Salman Abedi, and his father, and they had long-standing links to a violent jihadist group, and here's where it gets juicy. They were linked to this jihadist group that had British backing when they were operating in Libya during the 2011 Libyan war, and then all the way back to the 1996 attempt to kill Muammar Gaddafi. So they're looking more and more like intelligence assets. And it may be because this information is coming on out that British authorities are absolutely furious over the fact that information about this individual and his photo and photos of the bomb were leaked to the media from inside the United States. And the British authorities are now suspending intelligence sharing with the United States. They're absolutely upset. So one of the Five Eyes just blinked. Apparently, the British authorities kind of wanted to keep the wraps on who this guy was and where he came from, and unfortunately now it's out of the bag. He's a deep state intelligence operative. In fact, there's an article that came out of Blacklisted News. MI5 failed to stop the Manchester bomber despite repeated warnings from friends over a 5-year period. Over the last 5 years, friends and associates of the bombers were warning authorities, this guy is dangerous. He's talking about violence. He's talking about this. His own friends had called Britain's anti-terror hotline with concerns. And at this point, it doesn't appear he was under any kind of surveillance at all. So either all this anti-terror stuff was totally incompetent, or he was an asset working for the government. And that puts a whole different spin on the motive for the bombing. And of course, we are seeing the British authorities use this bombing to just transform British society, more cameras, more surveillance. And apparently UK Tories are saying that they're going to use the Manchester bombing to ban working cryptography in the British Empire, and basically going to demand companies stop using encryption, even though there is no indication that this bomber was using any kind of encryption or social media to do what he did. Supposedly, the story is he's a lone wolf, although they've arrested several other people. But there's no indication he was using encryption. Anybody seriously planning a crime or an act of terror already knows not to use social media of any kind. Don't use the cell phones. Don't use email. It's all being watched. This is going to be a boon for steganography. And if you're not familiar with what that term is, steganography is a process by which you can bury messages in the low-order bits of image or audio data. If you look at a JPEG photo, for example, down in the low-order bits, it's very noisy. Most imaging is done still with CCDs, charge-coupled devices, and they're very, very noisy. So you can take out that low-order plane of bits that looks just like noise, and you can put in a message that's made to look like noise. And that's really the best way to send a secret message, in a manner where people don't know there's even a message there. I mean, if you have a file that says message.cry, oh, that's an encrypted message. We have to look at that. if you have cutepuppies.jpg, they're just going to pass right on over that. And apparently, London isn't the only place where this fear is being fanned up. Apparently, over in Minnesota, there were two brothers with ties to the Middle East. Apparently, they got arrested with bomb-making materials, guns, and ammunition in their car. And they were arrested back on May 11th in North Minneapolis. And there are growing concerns. Wow, I wonder what these people were going to do with all these guns and bomb-making materials in the car. Did Minneapolis escape a false flag bombing? Because it does look like they're trying to ramp that up. Try and get the war wagon back on track. Fear, terror, terror, fear, fear, terror. Now, let's see. A video has surfaced of Debbie Wasserman Schultz threatening the police chief for gathering evidence regarding that IT staff that was caught spying on members of the Congress, and they were removed from their positions and only recently fired. One of them has already fled to Pakistan. Everybody's kind of wondering what happened on that one. There was a rival IT contractor who came in with a much lower bid to provide the same services and was told that, no, they were going to stay with the people that they already had, which suggests strongly that these IT workers had already acquired information that they were using to put pressure on the House of Representatives to keep them in their positions. So there's an ugly story there that does need to come on out. Now, the deep state, corporate media is still pushing Russia, 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 Russia. And the latest one is an attack on Attorney General Sessions, where the Department of Justice, in a report to CNN, is saying that Jeff Sessions did not disclose meetings he had last year with Russian officials when he applied for his security clearance. And apparently Sessions met with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak at least 2 times last year, but didn't note those interactions on the form, which requires him to list any contact he or his family had with a foreign government or its representatives over the past 7 years. Now, this, to me, looks like much ado about nothing. You're in Washington, D.C., you're going to be meeting Russian officials just as a normal course of business. And it may have just slipped his mind. But they're trying to make a big deal about that. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Joe from, I think it's pronounced Chicane, Pennsylvania. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Mike. How you doing there? Yeah, I had some trouble getting through, but I got through. As far as Trump goes, okay, I'm not registered to vote, okay, and I've never have been, okay? And what I'd just like to indicate here is the fact that both the parties, there are 2 masks on the same face.
Yes.
And they're serving an agenda, you know.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about, okay? Moving along here. I was in the motion picture industry for many, many, many years, from July 1974 to August of 2012. I was a professional theatrical motion picture projectionist, and I was a cinema technician.
Okay.
So I share your stigma for that industry and everything else, and it's completely changed, going from film to digital and like that. So, it's all changed, and it's not the same. And I don't want to get into all that, but I'm kind of having a problem concentrating here because I suffer from depression. I can't remember what I wanted to say.
Well, you were talking about Trump. You were talking about how you're not registered to vote. You've never voted, and then you wandered off into your career as a projectionist. So, did you have a comment about Donald Trump and what he's doing right now?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think he's a Zionist puppet. I think he's pro-Israel, pro-white hats, pro-NATO. I think it's not about what's right for us. It's winning or losing with him. That's what matters. He wants to win. He wants to lose. And it has nothing to do with what's in our best interest.
Well, he doesn't want to lose,
okay?
But he definitely wants to win. And you're right. That aspect of his personality may have been the lever that the neocons used to basically get him back on board with continuing the war agenda, because Trump has just done a 180 on so many of his campaign promises. But then by our age, we should be used to that. The lesson out of last year's election is it doesn't matter who we vote into Congress or the White House. The deep state agenda continues unimpeded. More war on the rest of the world, more poverty for us, continued loss of our freedoms, and pushing on forward to globalism, although Trump may have just dealt a little bit of a dent into that one. We'll talk about that later in the show.
Yeah, well, you know, even getting into the Clintons and you know, the drug thing, you know, Mena, Arkansas, and all that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the lock her up. That was one of the most powerful chants at those Trump rallies. And all of a sudden, we're seeing that Trump is just willing to kind of look the other way. So he's either made a deal or he's been threatened with death to himself or his family members, because that is the true nature of the government that he is now having to deal with. It really is an aristocracy, a criminal government. And it's a sad state of affairs for the ordinary American people who are still trying to play by the rules, and all of a sudden realize we're up against a system that has absolutely no compunction about operating outside the rules.
God, I'm so glad you're so succinct at the English language. You hit it right on the nail, right on the head.
Well, that's why I get the little bucks over here in talk radio.
but you know, when people of our age cease to exist, all of the knowledge and the memories of all that transpired will die with us, and that's the shame of it all.
I disagree. I disagree.
You don't?
No, I don't think so. I mean, as each generation in the past, when each generation passed away, the victors would write the history books, and that would pretty much be it. And all of our previous history was written under the control of whoever was calling the shots at the time. But the Internet has given humanity a collective memory outside government and corporate control, and we are seeing them try to regain control, but they are not going to succeed. And so when our generation passes away, I know that the content of my website has already been copied off thousands of times around the world and stashed away. Everybody knows now, once something is out on that Internet, you cannot take it back. And that is a blow for freedom for all humanity. There are a tremendous number of parallels between what's going on now with the advent of the Internet and the independent media and what was going on back when Gutenberg rediscovered movable type printing. Because Gutenberg's press changed the dynamic. Books became affordable to the middle class. Literacy soared. People started reading for themselves. And all of a sudden, the kings and the clergy did not have a total lock on what people were thinking. And there were efforts to try and suppress it. In fact, the first person to translate the Bible into English was burnt at the stake by the church, along with his Bibles. But they couldn't really keep a lid on it. And institutions either had to evolve and adapt to the new reality of a better educated, more informed middle class, or they went extinct. And we're seeing exactly the same circumstance repeating now, where governments and corporate media are discovering they can't lie with impunity to the population anymore and get away with it. And they're either going to learn that and alter their behavior to adapt to that new reality, or they're going to collapse. And that's another one of the reasons why I think that the U.S. federal government is going to have a Soviet Union-style collapse somewhere in the near future.
You put that very succinctly, and I stand corrected. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Vladimir Putin. Okay, if Vladimir Putin was running for the president of the United States, I would vote for him, okay? Yeah. Anybody else? I don't know. I don't know if you agree with all that.
Well, he's definitely the only adult right now in that playpen called global geopolitics. Got to let you go, Joe. Got to take a break for commercials. Okay. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And speaking of the corporate media struggling to maintain control of the narrative, which they've clearly lost, and getting on back to this attempt to create an obstruction of justice charge with which to impeach Donald Trump. That is rapidly falling apart. As you know, the original story came on out where somebody read supposedly an excerpt from a memo written by James Comey to the New York Times. They ran with the story, then they had to retract that. Now CNN has done a story saying that a source, an anonymous source familiar with the James Comey situation, says there isn't really a formal memo saying that Donald Trump asked Comey to back off any investigations, only that FBI Director James Comey believes that Trump was trying to influence his judgment. I mean, it's a rumor based on an innuendo wrapped inside a lot of wishful thinking, but it continues to fall apart here. Interestingly enough, Senator Rand Paul is out there saying that the more they go into these Russia probes in Congress, the more it's pointing the wrong direction. It's going back to the deep state. It's going back to Obama and his spying on the American people. They're not finding anything that Russia did, but the more they dig, the more they're finding that the Obama administration was openly in violation of privacy law. So this could actually backfire. All right, we're going to take some more phone calls. Philip in Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, a couple things real quick here. Talking about the Democrats' wishful thinking, Steely Dan did a great song years ago, and it reminds me of what the mentality of the Democrats. It's called pretzel logic.
Yes.
Yeah, but getting back to Seth Rich. I'm sorry. The Manchester bombing. Now, did I hear you right that you said that neighbors were trying to tip off the authorities for upwards of 5 years?
Friends of the guy, friends of the bomber had apparently been calling the anti-terror hotline and saying this guy is dangerous. He's talking about extremist views, he's talking about violence, and there is no indication that the authorities had any surveillance on him or were watching him. And of course, now we found out that this bomber and his father, when they were back in Libya, were part of an anti-Gaddafi jihadist group that was backed by the British government.
All right. Well, I wonder, do you know if Britain has a if you see something, say something policy?
I'm sure that they have something similar to that. That's why they have the anti-terror hotline in the first place. And if you're going to have a hotline like that, there has to be an advertising campaign saying, if you think you've seen a terrorist, call 1-800-TERROR or whatever the heck the number is.
Well, apparently it's just a farce then.
Well, either it's a farce or these guys were working for the British government right up to the present day.
Right. Well, then that means that, yeah, it's a total farce. Another quick question. As we were watching all of the dramatic, sensational arrests being performed on the other people involved in this bombing in Manchester, we were trying to figure out what initially led the authorities to this particular fella, Abedi.
Well, Abedi is the guy who blew up. I think.
Right.
Yeah.
But how did they know he was the guy?
I don't know. Maybe it was one of those magic fireproof passports or something. I actually don't have the details on that. But yes.
Trap.
Dear police, this is my name, and blah, 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 and taped to his forehead or something.
Well, to me, yeah, that's another red flag then.
I don't really. I actually do not know. I haven't looked into it because I've been focusing more on Seth Rich. But it
right.
seems to follow the pattern that we've seen of so many of these others. There's a conveniently dropped piece of information. 9/11 plotter's luggage didn't make the flight, and it's filled with Qurans and all this other stuff. And it's just too cute. All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to take a break.
It could be a cover for the Seth Rich. It could be a cover.
It could be a distraction. Yeah, the timing was absolutely perfect for distraction.
Do it for Seth. Justice delayed is justice denied.
All right, thank you very much. We got to let you go and take a break for commercials. Hello, Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. I'm looking at this feed from Fox News, and the banner at the bottom is President Trump condemns Manchester bombing leaks after complaints from the UK. So apparently this mishandling of sensitive information by U.S. intelligence agencies is becoming a big stink, and might actually start pulling back from all this Five Eyes. Everybody shares everything that they spy from everybody because it is apparently a huge embarrassment here. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Nathan in Northern California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Michael. Thank you very much for taking my call, and I know you have a lot of things, to talk about, so I'll make this really brief. There's a guy on YouTube. The name of the channel is Side Thorn, 2 words. He's offering $100,000. Anybody. This is good. Anybody that can prove that somebody died in Manchester or was injured. And I think that's great. And
okay, hang on. What we're getting into here is an attempt to sow a lot of additional confusion and muddy the water and keep people distracted from looking where people don't want them to look. At this point, I know we have the same thing going on over at the Boston bombing, and it may have even happened in Manchester. But at this point, let's not get ourselves wrapped up in the minutia of what exactly happened on the ground, because that is being done to keep us from paying attention to who really benefited from the bombing. And certainly Theresa May is capitalizing on it. The Tories are capitalizing on it. The war agenda is capitalizing on it. And I think that's where we need to be focusing our efforts. We need to sort of swim upstream.
Theresa May, in my personal opinion, she was head of the British security or whatever. I think she's a traitor. I really think she is a dirty, rotten traitor, and the sooner England gets rid of this woman, the better. But last thing, Michael, I know I'm going nowhere on this call. His bank is in Austin, Texas, and isn't that where Alex Jones is?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'll send Alex Jones $1,000. If he'll have this guy on for 15 minutes, I'll send you $300 if you'll have the guy on for a half an hour. That's basically all I had to say. I know we're bumping heads on this one.
Well, we are bumping heads on this one.
Wish you a great show.
First of all, I do not book guests on this show for pay. That's one of the hard and fast rules here. And as far as what Alex Jones is going to do, Alex and I are no longer in communication. I have a lot of respect for him, and I admire what he's doing. But we've just fallen out of communication over the years. So if you're going to make that offer, you have to go on to Alex's show and make the offer to him. And I think he's probably going to give you the same answer that I did. All right, Nathan, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here and get on back to the news. All right, so we have this continued attempt to sell this idea through endless repetition that Russia hacked the U.S. election, Russia hacked the U.S. election. And, of course, they're skipping over the history that the Central Intelligence Agency has interfered with at least 81 foreign elections in the past century. And so governments interfering with each other's elections in order to get a government voted in more favorable to their interests is kind of a standard thing that is being done, certainly by the United States of America. And there was a database amassed by political scientist Dov Levin of Carnegie Mellon University, and he's listed it all out, these 81 times. The CIA has gone on in and interfered with the election process, democracy, in all these other countries. So what we have here is a classic case of the pot calling the kettle black. And again, something that everybody needs to keep in mind. All of the election fraud that was actually documented from last year in both the primaries and the general election favored Hillary Clinton. So the story that Russia was trying to rig the election to favor Donald Trump simply does not make any sense whatsoever. that we do have an election system that is wide open to fraud and manipulation, especially with regard to voter ID issues and all the illegal immigrants who were voting. That does need to be changed. And I was kind of expecting that Donald Trump was going to do something about this. Now, I know he's set up another commission, but so far we haven't seen anything come out of the commission. And unfortunately, the same thing is true of the Vaccine Safety Commission. And it may be that they're doing good work, but nothing is coming on out, and certainly the corporate media is trying to pretend they do not exist. Firstly, because the corporate media is itself involved in manipulating elections in this country, and corporate media is very dependent on pharmaceutical advertising from the very companies that are being looked at by the Vaccine Safety Commission. All right, let's take another phone call. James on Maui. Aloha, brah. What's up?
Oh, a couple things. First, that guy was talking about Putin, and I'm not a big Putin fan. He's a nationalist, and I guess he's an Orthodox Christian. But there's one story about him that goes back when the East German Stasi was breaking up. He was in the Russian offices there of the KGB,
yes.
And he came out with his pistol and scared a mob away. He said, "Listen, I have 12 shots in this, gun. I'm saving the last one for me. But come ahead if you're coming."
Oh, that's a great story. I never heard that one. I never heard that one, but that's a good story.
So, yeah, well, but the very fact that he was in an intelligence service, which is, there's not much good you can say about KGB, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Well, let me get in here a little bit. There's not much you can say good about the CIA, and that's where George Herbert Walker Bush came out of. He'd been director of the CIA. He was involved with the CIA back when John F. Kennedy was assassinated.
Yeah, and there's rumors that he was in part of the assassination party.
Yes.
It was so botched, I believe it. For starters, why didn't they have the guy that actually shot him on the grassy knoll have a suppressor on his rifle? It would have maybe thrown off the window of that. Look at the photo. This huge crowd, the cop, everyone else is chasing up there because that's where they heard the shot from.
Well, remember back when the Kennedy assassination happened, the model was you can do whatever it is you're going to do and then rely on the corporate media to sell the official story afterwards. And anybody who didn't agree with the official story was labeled a conspiracy theorist. And it did work for a lot of years. And a lot of people who did know the truth or had aspects of the truth wound up dead under suspicious circumstances, like Dorothy Kilgallen.
Well, I think the people that ordered it were the Dallas brothers and Lyndon Johnson, and they may have been had asked for permission above their pay grade.
I don't think they ordered it. The way the Kennedy assassination came together, first of all, you need to understand that a major event like that, an assassination or a war, is never done for just one reason. What you do is you have a group of people or institutions or governments that have their own particular agenda that happens to be solved by the same action, the same assassination, the same war. In the case of John F. Kennedy, you had the Texas oil billionaires who were angry over the oil depletion allowance. You had the CIA, which felt Kennedy had betrayed them at the Bay of Pigs. You had Israel, which was very angry with John F. Kennedy for opposing their acquiring of nuclear weapons. You had organized crime, which felt betrayed by the Kennedy family. And all of them working together basically said, yeah, we're going to arrange this assassination. And the way it works is anytime somebody gets close to one of the plotters, they'll leak some evidence that leads in the other direction. So people's attention is sort of bouncing around between these pins like a pinball machine. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you must be very young. But that's how they maintain plausible deniability. There's no one source. There's no one mastermind. It's just a group of people. And that's how they basically avoided exposure of the plot. But of course, some 30 years after the JFK assassination, 50% of Americans polled understood the Warren Report was a complete cover-up, whitewash.
Yeah, the people who are on it. Anyway, you know, the reason they're doing this whole Russia deal is on account of the Clintons with foundation with the Uranium One.
Yes.
And that takeover of the wildlife sanctuaries
Yes.
offices.
Yes.
That have all that. That was basically a conspiracy. The thing about what's great is conspiracy has no statute of limitations. Conspiracy to commit murder. And that's what that was, that car going along, and it was stopped. They had no reason to cycle that guy.
No, they really didn't. And but getting back to the Uranium One deal itself, I mean, there's a very obvious case of colluding with Russia to one's personal financial gain. But the corporate media is ignoring it because their mission is to make you think that Donald Trump is in cahoots with those evil Russians, and in order to protect, well, basically the oligarchs who still want to continue running the country as their own personal little piggy bank. Okay?
I suppose. Yeah, I've been not really listening to your show. I'm trying to get back into cognitive dissonance. Because it's just distressing me here. I don't need any stress. And current events, now this trip of Trump's over to Saudi Arabia just has me irate. I think about it.
Well, it's angered a lot of people because he has reversed some of the pledges that he made on the campaign trail about reducing our entanglements in other parts of the world, especially the Middle East, and now he's over there selling these huge arms deal to Saudi Arabia, which has a lot of people very upset about that. And Trump's backers are out there trying to say, well, you know, just consider all the jobs that this arms deal is going to create, which sounds good for the economy. But as one of our readers wrote on in, what a sorry state of affairs it is when the only way we can create jobs in this country is because of mass murder in other parts of the world.
I go along with that, you know, and when I was a kid, my dad worked for Univac, and
oh, I remember that.
Well, I guess one of the big contracts he did for several years, they were designing the computers aboard the missile system.
Well, we used some of their computers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We had what was called the Exec 8 timeshare system that was running in the area where I was, and I actually got certified to run it myself, to run my own software. Anyway, James, thank you. Need to let you go. We're going to switch over to Kyle in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Going back to the election fraud and as far as Hillary Clinton and the primaries, have you followed any of the transcripts that are coming out of the trial that's going on with a lawyer named Jared Beck?
No, I haven't been. You know, there have been so many other things that have been taking my attention, but I would love it if some information is coming on out confirming that there was more election fraud on behalf of Hillary Clinton. I mean, Hillary and her people are still out there saying she won the popular vote, but we already know that her margin in the popular vote is much smaller than the estimated number of illegal immigrants who were voting. Now we're finding out there were multiple votes, multiple registrations in states, and we're not just talking about somebody who moved from one state to another and re-registered. We're talking about people who turned out to have active voter registrations in 3 and 4 states. So
I'm going to send you a copy of these transcripts.
Okay.
Now, these are from Bernie Sanders' lawyers, and these are Hillary Clinton and Debbie Wasserman Schultz are trying to get the claim, the lawsuit thrown out on the basis that they are the Democrats. This is what they're arguing in court. You have to read the transcripts. That they are allowed to rig primaries, and that if the court were to take this to trial, it would be a violation of the First Amendment.
Boy, that's a bit of a reach, and it all depends on how corrupted the judge is, whether he's going to go along with that. But to the best of my knowledge, and I'm pretty sure most Democratic voters are going to agree with me, the Democratic National Committee does not have a right to rig the primaries to their favored candidate. That is absolutely fraud.
They're also arguing that there's no way to determine what a Democrat is, and that the people who funded both the Clinton campaign and the Sanders campaign through many hundreds of thousands of private donations, they don't count as Democrats, so they can't be defrauded because there's no such thing as a Democrat. This is what they're arguing.
That's a bit of a reach. I would imagine that whatever, when they sign that voter registration card, that would identify them for legal purposes as being part of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I'm going to send you this stuff. This should be front page news on every newspaper in the country, and it's shocking that it's not.
Well, we've touched on some of the high points of that in the past, but yeah, that is really a little bit out there to say that the Democratic National Committee has a right to rig the primaries. And we know on the face of it that's absurd. If the Democratic National Committee had the right to choose the nominee, why have primaries to begin with? See, that's where that argument breaks apart.
Why would you collect money? That's fraud, to collect money under the assumption that it's a fair and balanced election.
I would agree.
The DNC isn't even arguing that what they did wasn't fraud. They're not even arguing. They're just arguing that, yes, it was fraud, but they were allowed to do it because of their bylaw.
Well, the other one that is really very, very absurd is claiming that the First Amendment right to freedom of speech protects their right to commit fraud. And that's not true.
What they're saying is that if the courts were to come in and rule against it, that would be a violation of the DNC's First Amendment, because their bylaws, they can say and do whatever they want, but not necessarily have to follow it. And the argument that they're using, this is not a lie.
That's absurd. That is absurd. All right, Kyle, going to have to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently Joe from Pennsylvania called back with a postscript on his earlier call. So, Joe, what did you want to add? Joe, are you there?
Hello, you there?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay, thank you very much. One thing I wanted to say, I called you a few years back. I suffered with depression for many, many, many years, okay? I had one fiancé die of a heart attack in front of me, and I had another woman I was married to for 9 years commit suicide. So, that isn't a prerequisite for depression. I don't know what is. But people that are struggling with antidepressants, SSRIs, SNRIs, mood stabilizers, I wanted to say one thing. I wanted to get it out there to your listeners, okay? I beat it, okay? And I'm going to tell you how I beat it. And it's not what's recommended, but I did it because there's no taper. I went cold turkey. And I'm going to tell you something. I quit smoking. I quit drinking. I quit taking all the SSNRIs, mood stabilizers, all that crap. I went about 2 weeks, and I became aphasic in my speech, and I had involuntary muscle spasms. I went over to a hospital emergency room, and what they ended up doing was putting me on a benzodiazepine. I guess it's the Xanax. But I beat it. I went cold turkey.
Yeah.
I got that crap out of my system.
Okay, well, first of all,
I'm not recommending it. Okay. I'm not recommending it.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're coming up on the top of the hour commercial break. I admire what you did, and yes, all of us need to find our ways out of whatever our particular chemical dependencies are. But in regard to the SSRIs and prescription medications, quitting them cold turkey can be very, very dangerous, and you need to talk to your doctor about that. And I know that because back when Claire was dealing with her joint pain, before we found out it was linked to formaldehyde, they had her on a specific medication, and she did not like what it was doing to her. So the doctor said, okay, go ahead and quit. And the doctor failed to tell her that she needed to taper off. So she tried to cold turkey, and she almost went into convulsions. So great that you're off those medications, but you do need to be very careful about how you do that.
Yeah, I survived it. Okay, I'm not saying everybody can, but yeah, I appreciate what you're saying because my wife suffered from a lot of pain. She was on a lot of pain medications and you know, antidepressants and SSRIs, and it took her out.
Yeah, we went through that as well, and we finally figured out it was these formaldehyde precursor chemicals in low-end cosmetics and household cleaning products that were causing the joint pain. And apparently it's a widespread problem, but nobody wants to address it because the manufacturers of these products like to use these formaldehyde precursors as a preservative to basically control decay and product loss to maximize their profitability. Anyway, listen, Joe, we're going to let you go. And one more time, little rule we have here. One call per caller per show. Please don't keep calling in over and over and over and over again. All right, we're coming up here on the top of the hour. Very interesting article that came out over in John Rappaport's website saying, peace through mutual blackmail, is that what's going on in Washington, D.C.? Because we know there's all this crime and corruption, but nothing ever gets done. And it's almost like there's a tacit agreement. I won't spill your secrets if you won't spill mine. That's a terrible way to run a government. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, turning over to the war zones, as you've been hearing lately, the Syrian government forces have been making tremendous gains against the U.S.-backed rebels, terrorists, whatever you want to call them here. And once again, as the terrorists abandon their bases, the Syrian government forces are finding U.S.-made missiles and Israeli-made mortars left behind. So we know who it is who's been supporting this insurgency against Assad. And it's no secret that's what's really been going on, and they've been trying to get rid of Assad for something like 5 years. But every time the Syrian rebels basically drop their weapons and run, they send in more weapons. And so we're seeing this report out of Blacklisted News that truckloads of U.S. arms and ammo reached the Kurdish militia in Syria. Over 100 trucks loaded with U.S. arms and ammunition, including heavy mortars and anti-tank missiles, have reached the Kurdish-controlled northern Syria city of Hasaka over the past week. So they're still pouring in all these weapons all over the place. War, war, and more war. Apparently, yet another video has surfaced showing the U.S.-backed white helmets assisting in public executions in rebel-held areas of Syria. Now, remember, this group is being promoted as the good guys, and, you know, they're on the side of peace, and they've been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. They had a documentary made about them. It's a manufactured group. It's a manufactured group, and this video is just pointing out that they are really just some more of the rebels, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, whatever you want to call them. You know, they just put on their helmets and do a video. And on that same theme here, Russia's Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu has basically said that after studying the video that came out of Idlib, that he's absolutely convinced it's a fake. It's staged. And he has cited many of the same observations that we made, that you have these so-called first responders handling the bodies of sarin victims without any safety equipment. They've got a mask on their face, but they're not wearing gloves. They're not wearing isolation clothing. And if those people had really been killed with sarin gas, it would be very, very dangerous to touch their bodies because it would be coming out of the skin. And the first responders would be dead. And there's also that very embarrassing clip where they're panning the camera over the faces of these tragically dead children, and then all of a sudden the camera bumps back, and one of the kids has opened her eyes to make sure, see, has the camera gone by or not? Now, over in Iraq, U.S. troops, remember the ones that are not supposed to be there for combat, are now within firing range of the ISIS fighters in Iraq. The whole region is now a tinderbox ready to be set off. It's very nerve-wracking. I'm wondering what the bookmakers in Las Vegas, what their odds are for full regional war breaking out in the next month. As story coming out of Sputnik News, and they're hitting the same point I made earlier in the show. Trump breaks vow to avoid Middle East entanglements. And political observers are saying that, yes, it's a very spectacular and confusing U-turn, and yes, it is. And it does seem to reinforce the idea that it doesn't really matter who we the people vote into either Congress or the White House, because the oligarchs, the money junkies, are calling the shots. And the money junkies seem to think that global war is what they want right now. Either to reshuffle the deck for a new game of empire, or simply to acquire more wealth, more power, more influence, bring about the global government, depopulate the planet. We don't know what they're really thinking. But it is sad and tragic that we, the American people, seem to have lost all control over this nation. Because as the United States was founded, it was supposed to be a nation firmly under the control of the will of the American people through their elected representatives in a republic. And that has been stolen away from us. And that is a tragedy. Now, Rand Paul is still talking about getting a motion to the floor of Congress to oppose this Saudi weapons deal. And again, everybody's focused on the money. It's $110 billion worth of new arms trade, and the stock in the companies who will likely be fulfilling that arms deal has gone up. And they're trying to allay our concerns about pouring more weapons into a war zone by saying, well, it's going to create jobs. It's going to create jobs. And as I said earlier, what a sorry state of affairs where the only way we can bring jobs to America is mass murder on the rest of the world. But then that's part of the pattern. Get into an economic mess, get into a war to get out of it, and they've done it twice before. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, here we are, ready to go again. Except at this time, I am concerned the United States is going to lose this one. For a multiplicity of reasons, over and above the high cost and poor quality of our current weapons. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. But it looks like Congress is starting to push back on some of these issues. And I think the concerns are, and all of this is mitigated by where members of Congress have their money invested. Members of Congress who are invested in the defense industries, they're going to be all in favor of this deal. Members of Congress invested in parts of the world that are likely to be destroyed by a regional war, they're probably going to be against it. But there is a bit of a pushback here. Now, Donald Trump wants to send more troops into Afghanistan, and apparently there is now a bipartisan group in Congress demanding an open debate on whether we should just get the heck out of Afghanistan. What are America's interests in Afghanistan that justify this continuing military occupation? Well, we know what the real interests are. Oil pipeline right-of-way and opium. Obviously, the latter one is not going to be mentioned on a debate on the floor of the United States Congress. But they are talking about a new House bill, House Resolution 1666, that will simply cut off all funding for military activities in Afghanistan. And they're just hammering the point. The United States has been at war in Afghanistan for 16 years. We have kids just going into high school now that were born after the start of that war. We've been at war in Afghanistan longer than we were in World War I or World War II, or both put together. And it really is time to put an end to it. Fortunately, those oligarchs involved with the opium traffic won't want that to stop, because if the Taliban takes Afghanistan back under their control, they will reimpose their ban on the cultivation of opium. And then where will the American drug lords get their opium from? Well, go into North Korea. There's a lot of opium growing over there. Isn't that kind of a weird thing to think about, that much of our foreign war policy is all about where American drug lords can get their raw materials? Opium from Vietnam, cocaine from Nicaragua, opium from Afghanistan. But it's true. Britain once actually fought a war with China over Britain's supposed right to sell opium to the Chinese people. And you've probably seen the stereotypical image of a Chinese opium den, just this smoke-filled room and racks of cots, and all these people just passed out after smoking the opium. That was coming from Britain. And Britain at the time was actually buying it from right here in the United States. It was a legal crop back then. It was considered impolite, but it was legal to grow opium in the United States, and it was sold to Britain, who then in turn sold to China. And much of that money shaped American politics in the early days. The official name of the Skull and Bones fraternity at Yale University is the Russell Trust. And the Russell family fortune was built on that opium trade. And again, stressing it was legal at that time. That's how the politics of contraband have shaped our history. Whether it's opium or alcohol during Prohibition or drugs during the War on Drugs. It is a potent force in the background that has shaped much of our history. Now, getting back to the present day here, and Donald Trump continuing his tour around the world, Rex Tillerson is out there saying Donald Trump is going to be really tough on NATO, and basically saying that it is time for the other member nations of NATO to start paying for more of this, because right now the United States government, meaning you, the taxpayer, are paying for most of NATO. And Tillerson is also saying that NATO should formally join the anti-Daesh coalition, which sounds good on the face of it. NATO will join the war on terror, but we know that the U.S. government has been using terrorists here, terrorists there to justify invading nations. It wasn't all that long ago where the United States government was trying to insist that the only reason they were in Syria was to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And we know that's not the real agenda. And now NATO would be on board for any future U.S. invasions of any country that the U.S. just says, oh, we saw ISIS over there. We saw ISIS over there. We got to go on in. Interestingly enough, there's been a poll taken across Europe of ordinary Europeans, and much as I expected would be the case, they're not really all that eager about war with Russia. They think it's a really, really bad idea. And in fact, 3 of the major European power nations, the populations say they would not want to be in a collective defense. If one of the European member nations were to go to war with Russia, they're not feeling strongly that they would just want to hop on board with that. And apparently the problem is worse in Germany, where the people just say, we don't want to get involved. We've been in the last 2 world wars. We were the bad guys in the last 2 world wars. We don't want to get involved. And again, if you travel around Europe, the scars from World War I and World War II are still there, still visible. It's in your face what happened to that part of the world. And that's why they don't want to see it. Here in the United States, we don't have those scars. We have a few Civil War battlefields and memorials and monuments, and those are being torn down right now. For Americans alive today, war is an abstraction. It's something they see on TV and movies. They don't have that connection to it through their parents and grandparents like you do in Europe. Now, the European Union is having a little bit of another upset. They're looking at possibly another Dutch election because once again, the second round of talks forming a coalition government basically collapsed. They're unable to get that together, and they're struggling to find something. And again, the impasse seems to be the divide between those who are nationalists and those who are the globalists. And apparently the lines are being drawn, and the language is getting very heated. Down in Turkey, Erdogan is responding to threats by Germany to pull out their army and just saying, go ahead, we'll just say goodbye. Goodbye. So Turkey is becoming a real wild card in that part of the world. It's hard to know what Erdogan is thinking, where he's going. It's hard to know who's on whose side when you look at who's giving whose weapons and who's fighting this party and trying to get that Kurdistan going. It's a very unstable situation. One of the things that really bothers me is that Donald Trump is out there making these grand statements and global deals, and it's almost like he thinks the nation and the war are just going to run themselves when he's not looking. And I'm sure that there's probably a lot of people in the military high command who are making decisions on their own. But it does feel like it's fragmented, that there isn't a grand plan, and that it is spiraling toward chaos. Meanwhile, over in Yemen, the World Health Organization has reported a 50% rise in cholera cases in Yemen. And apparently there have been 35,000 cases since April 27th when the outbreak started. This thing is spreading rather rapidly. And knowing what I know about cholera and water supplies and sewage, it almost seems like this could be a repeat of when the UN forces accidentally, we are told, introduced cholera to Haiti, that this infection may have actually come from outside, but it does seem to be spreading very, very rapidly here. By the way, when Donald Trump was down in Israel, over and above all the money that is given to Israel by the U.S. government in violation of the Symington Amendment and the Glenn Act, apparently the U.S. added another $75 million to the aid package for the missile defense program. Little extra present from Trump to Netanyahu. And Netanyahu has expressed his gratitude, if you will, and respect by declaring that Israel doesn't need a green light from Washington, D.C. To go on building illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. And this is just a day after Trump left Israel. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman said that we're just going to do what we want. We don't need the White House approval. And, of course, it would be inappropriate for the White House to approve a settlement anyway, given that it is illegal under international law. But Lieberman said we didn't ask for a green light, and we won't ask for a green light. They could care less. Let's take a phone call. Jesse in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha.
Aloha.
First of all, I just want to say that you've been a hero of mine for maybe 8-9 years. I've been following you. I wish I had money to donate, but I spread your link, tell everyone I know.
Good.
I do the best I can. It is honestly, I just want you to. I sent you an email maybe 2 minutes ago called "Build the Wall." Look at that and get back in touch with me if you like the idea.
It just this second came on in, and I will take a look at it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Get back in touch with me because it's very. I think it's going to be huge. I think it's going to be huge. Anyway, that's really it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, here's an interesting little development, and I'm still trying to figure this one out. Apparently, Donald Trump's pick for European Union ambassador has warned France and Germany against plans to pursue a United States of Europe, saying the United States, our United States, will fiercely oppose such a move. Now, that is very, very interesting, because obviously for the globalist agenda, they want to fuse the EU member states into a single federalized national government. And so if Donald Trump were supporting the globalist agenda, he would go along with that. But he's clearly opposed to it. Now, I don't think it has to do with the globalist agenda. I suspect, I theorize. Donald Trump's thinking is that a United States of Europe would be an economic and military power that could pose a serious impediment to the United States' plans for the future. As long as the EU is fragmented and fighting among itself, it's relatively benign, and it still can be controlled and exploited and used for these various wars. But a United States of Europe could stand up to the United States and say, we think we're done with the wars, and we're done with the dollar. And that would be a major game changer, and I think that may be what is behind Trump's opposition to the United States of Europe. I know that the people living in those member nations of the EU, they do not want a United States of Europe. In fact, anybody looking at the United States would say, that's a bad idea. All right, we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, getting on over to Korea, you want to talk about imperial hubris. Rex Tillerson is urging North Korea to back off the nuclear program and instead says North Korea to simply trust the United States pledge of no hostility. Is this guy on drugs? I mean, look back through history at all the times the U.S. has said, we're not going to invade, and then they invade. Before the war in Iraq, Iraq and the United States were good friends, remember? That's absolutely unsupportable. Now, maybe Tillerson did it purely to say, well, we attempted to find a peaceful solution and North Korea said no. But North Korea, or for that matter, any other government on earth, would be a fool to trust the U.S. promise that there will be no hostility, especially in the current era of the U.S. invading, regime-changing, drone-striking nation after nation after nation after nation after nation. And there are other historical precedents for countries that said, we are going to sign a non-aggression treaty, and then it gets broken. It's not a supportable claim. China has finally issued a statement following this overflight, supposedly, from North Korea into South Korea, which triggered some return fire by artillery, saying that no one has a right to bring war and chaos to the Korean peninsula. And it's interesting the way they phrased that, because they didn't specify who they're talking about. And I think that may have been as much a message for the United States as it was for the two Koreas. Now remember, South Korea's new president wants reunification. It's going to be one of the goals of his term in office. It's the United States that wants to keep them split up and fighting with each other. Now, North Korea has finally responded to this incident involving the artillery firing over the DMZ. And they're saying basically it's a reckless provocation, and by the way, you were shooting at a bird. And remember, on the south side, they didn't know what it was. They thought it might be a drone. Could also have been a bird. Everybody overreacted. You ever see the Steven Spielberg movie 1941 about how in Los Angeles it's just after Pearl Harbor and everybody's expecting an imminent Japanese invasion, which was actually never part of the Japanese plan, and how everybody's so tense and things get out of control and they start shooting into the air wildly? That's actually based on a real story that did happen, where they had all the anti-aircraft guns and searchlights and everything out there, and somebody made a mistake, flew the wrong place without clearing it, and the whole sky lit up. That actually did happen. It's called war fever. And you have to be very, very careful about that, especially with the situation we have in the Middle East, where we have these U.S. combat troops within firing range of ISIS. Somebody makes a stupid mistake and the whole area could explode. Meanwhile, here in Hawaii, our local Hawaii Department of Defense is apparently now in the process of updating their nuclear contingency plan with regard to a potential threat from North Korea. Now, Claire and I live here on the island of Oahu. I'm not particularly worried about an attack by North Korea for two reasons. One, there really isn't all that much point in North Korea expending one of its few nuclear weapons and few Taepodong 2 launchers trying to hit us. And so far, the largest nuclear weapon they have tested is just 10 kilotons. In the world of nuclear weapons, it's a firecracker. And I've run through the nuke map. If North Korea were to hit the Pearl Harbor command centers with a 10 kiloton warhead, we'd lose our windows here, but other than that, we would survive, probably. The big worry, of course, is getting into a shooting war with Russia and China. And yes, this island would be a target because all of the communications for the Pacific Fleet are routed through here. And that would be a problem. All right, got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones here. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, how am I coming in, Mike?
You sound like you're on a speakerphone. Can you use a handset?
No, I'm stuck. How about right now?
All right, well, just go ahead and tell us what's on your mind.
Oh, what regional war are you talking? What, like a regional war breaking out? Where at? I mean, what countries?
Across the whole Middle East, Iran, Saudi Arabia, just all of them.
Wow, that'd be pretty wild. Remember I called in a few days ago and I said that other countries may stop exchanging intelligence with the United States because of the people hanging around Trump. You remember that call?
Yeah, I remember that call.
And I just heard today that England has quit sending intelligence to the United States after this terrorist attack.
Well,
did you hear that?
Yeah, we reported it earlier in the show because apparently somebody that had access to that information did leak it to the corporate media, and it's proved to be a huge embarrassment because once the name and the photo was out there, people started digging, and they found this guy's, first of all, for 5 years his friends were trying to warn the British authorities that he might be a dangerous terrorist, and now we find out that he and his father were both part of a British-supported jihadi group operating in Libya all the way back to 1996. So it's a big, stinky mess, and I understand that's why the British are probably very, very upset.
You know, all these have the same pattern. They know about these characters right away. Person kills himself. It has the same flavor of all the other terrorist attacks. It kind of strikes me as a traveling rock and roll show that has, support groups. It has pirate techniques. It has actors and actresses. And they just move from region to region, and it's like a traveling terror show.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. And yes, they always do seem to follow the same patterns. And apparently there was supposedly a security drill scheduled to be in that area. So again, right now the indications are this was another false flag. Maybe it was staged as a distraction from the Seth Rich story. Maybe it was staged to help Theresa May in the upcoming election. But it does reek of being a false flag attack.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. Now then, turning on over to China. And again, this is clearly not the agenda Donald Trump promised us he was going to be following as president. But a U.S. Navy warship, the USS Dewey, traveled within 12 nautical miles to the Mischief Reef in the Spratly Islands. And this is part of the area that China says is their territorial waters, based on pre-existing treaties from the end of World War II, and are now declared to be in dispute with other countries such as Japan and the Philippines. And China has lodged a protest with the United States and may take it to the United Nations, because even the United States normally recognizes a 12-mile boundary for territorial waters, and this ship intentionally violated that. So this is another clear, obvious provocation. The oligarchs in this country seem dead set on having a global war to try and get out of the economic mess that they've created with their addiction, their money junkyism, as it were. Down in Venezuela, as you know, they're dealing with a huge economic meltdown. They've been the victims of U.S. economic warfare for a long time, attempts at overthrow, and now it looks like the government may, in fact, be brought down. And as is usually the case, these things are not thought all the way through until it's really too late, because now they're raising a concern. Venezuela has 5,000 Russian-made shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles. And only now U.S. officials are becoming concerned that Venezuela might just sell them off to somebody that the U.S. does not want to have those. Maybe the U.S. should go on in and offer to buy them. I'm not sure the present government of Venezuela would be all that sympathetic to such a request. But it is a concern. And these shoulder-fired missiles, they're sort of the Russian version of the American Stinger. They can be used to bring down warplanes or commercial airplanes. And, again, unintended side effects of U.S. foreign policy. Over in Montana, this is getting a little bit weird out there. A lot of people are up in arms how Donald Trump sort of muscled his way to the front of the NATO group shot. And apparently upset one of the other NATO members there. But there's a little more physicality going on down in Montana. The GOP candidate for Montana's congressional seat has been charged with misdemeanor assault. Apparently he slammed a Guardian reporter to the floor on the eve of the state's special election, breaking the reporter's glasses and shouting, "Get the blank out of here." Now, this is Ben Jacobs, and he's a Guardian political reporter, was asking Greg Gianforte, a tech millionaire endorsed by Trump, about the Republican health care plan when the candidate allegedly body slammed the reporter. Now, that's the version that's coming out of reader-supportednews.org, but there's another version which says that the candidate slammed Ben Jacobs to the floor because Ben Jacobs asked him about his investments in Gazprom and Rosneft, which right now in this current McCarthy-esque anything connected to Russia must be evil. That's a very, very bad thing to come on out on the night before the special election. And that is really where all this Russia bashing is very, very dangerous, because remember, following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States and Russia moved together, and they started doing business with each other, including our politicians and our leaders. It's all very above board, very legal. There's nothing wrong with it. The problem is now that they're trying to demonize Russia and use Russia to tarnish political enemies, their own financial involvements with Russia and associations with Russian officials and businessmen are now a serious liability. So like this candidate, they're out there trying to say, well, you use Russian dressing on your salad, and at the same time, they're having to find a way to try and clean up their own past associations. And yes, they could liquidate their investments in Russia's economy, but the records are still there that it was going on. There's a time when hypocrisy will catch up to you when you're playing like that. Now, apparently, globalists in Congress and inside the Trump administration are now back to trying to expand and empower NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. And this NAFTA agreement was considered sort of the foundation layer of creating a North American Union out of Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and possibly one or two others, that would be modeled on the European Union. And we all know how wonderfully well that has turned out. But apparently they're back to pushing NAFTA and saying, we've got to have this, we've got to have all these free trade agreements. Well, you know something? If trade is free, you don't need an agreement. You're free to trade. Let's just trade. If you look at all these so-called free trade agreements, you will find they are the exact opposite. They are restraints on trade. They are constraints on nations that they will buy certain products from other nations, even if they don't want them or use them. It's about a globalist-controlled economy. And if you want to know how well that works, go back to the days of the Soviet Union, where everything economic in the Soviet Union went through the Politburo. And they made some hideously devastating mistakes. Lysenkoism being a real good one. Now, as you know, here in Hawaii, we're dealing with our light rail project, which is way behind schedule, way over budget. The track that's already been laid is having to be repaired and refurbished and reinforced. Very, very bad planning. And one of the big stinks that we have here is the rail cars themselves, which were already delivered, are now going to have to be either totally overhauled or more likely they're just going to be replaced. It's going to be less expensive to buy new cars than it is to try and dismantle the old ones, because the old ones were found to have cracks in the frames. The frames are these 4 giant aluminum I-beams that run down the middle of the car. And taking the entire car apart, putting the new beams back in, it's just cheaper to get new ones. Interestingly enough, there is a over in Massachusetts, there's a Chinese rail manufacturer that has been hired to build rail cars for America's commuter train systems. It's like we've forgotten how to do that as well. And yes, our rail cars here were ordered from a company in Japan. It's going to be very hard bringing jobs back to the United States. We've had a generation that has lost the skill set to be manufacturers. And we're not going to get it back until we're willing to grit our teeth, pay perhaps a slightly higher price, and start manufacturing the things we need within our own borders. All right, let's grab a phone call. Rob in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Mike. I just caught your story when you were talking about, I'm not sure what the reporter, what's his first name? It's Jacobs?
Ben Jacob. Ben Jacob.
Okay, well, this guy, the story you just said you got 2 sources on that.
Yes.
And they're both pretty much incorrect.
Okay.
The true story is, and the reason how I come up with this is because I actually was listening to a program this morning who was like, guy's like, hey, I know somebody that was there, and he actually called me from the event, and he explained what was happening. Mm-hmm. There was apparently a meet and greet. There was a meet and greet first, and then they went into a separate area where it was just by invite only, and then Jacobs came barging in, and he started just shouting out, you know, Russia this, Russia that, what's your involvement with Russia, investments with Russia, this or that. Well, they're like, hey, buddy, this is private only. You cannot be here. He just kept pushing his way in, and then he started getting into the candidate's face with his, well, I'm not sure what he had, a phone, a device, or whatever, but he got in the candidate's face, and then the candidate finally said, kind of like was shoving the thing, get that out of my face, or we'll get it out of my face, and to shove it aside, to shove it like as he was doing a shoving motion, Jacobs grabs the guy's wrist and then literally pulls him down and does, and as it was described, somebody described a good analogy for it, was when you have a pro basketball game and they're going for the foul, and you have your 6'5" guy falling down. Oh my gosh, I'm hurt. He just literally falls down. That's what he did. He grabbed the candidate's wrist and had him pull down and obviously land on top of him. Then he started crying. Oh my gosh!
But hang on. You did confirm that my second source was correct. That the reporter was asking about Russian investments, and that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was basically where we left that off. All right. Well, Rob, thank you for the update.
Can I just, Mr. Mike? Can I just?
Okay.
Again,
I mean,
somebody he was slammed to the ground.
Forget about what people are saying. Hang on, Rob. Forget what people are saying. Okay, there had to be a video camera running of the altercation.
Here's the thing. He was counting on that there was nothing, but they think there was. So I think there's.
Well, let's wait and get the video and see what.
He was counting on nothing.
Okay, Rob. Okay, all right. All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. But yeah, it's very easy for people to call into radio shows and say, well, this is what really happened, and the candidate was the victim, and the Guardian reporter was being bad. Most of the Guardian reporters I've had interaction with, they're very low-key, and I'm sure this candidate is desperate to try and salvage his reputation, especially since the election is happening right now. But again, let's forget about he said, she said, and let us, in fact, go on over and wait for the video to come on out and see what really happened. Okay, now, let's talk about the economic news. Sears is, if not the iconic American retailer. It is certainly one of the top iconic American retailers. And over the last 6 years, they have lost $10 billion, with a B, dollars, and they are in serious, serious trouble. all of our retail sector is in trouble. There's no more money left circulating among the ordinary American people. And you can see it. Look at the prices on the automobile advertisements. If anybody actually had money, this is a great time to buy a car. But it isn't out here. Our nation has been plundered, looted to support the war agenda. And despite Trump's promises of bringing back the jobs and manufacturing, again, like the story I just talked about, you have American companies that run commuter trains are going to China. Now, China is going to build the factory here in the United States, in Springfield, and that'll mean some American jobs. But it underscores the fact that we have abandoned our manufacturing so long, we have an entire generation of Americans who really don't understand what it is to go into a factory, grab some tools, and make something. And yes, today there's a lot of computer-aided manufacturing, and it can be very good, but at some point somebody's got to grab those parts and assemble them. And yes, there are more and more robots coming online, and that's a trend that I actually am opposed to. Simply because if you have an economy where all of the manufacturing and agriculture is done by robots and ordinary people do not have jobs, how do you power the commerce? Who's going to buy the manufactured goods? Who's going to buy the agricultural produce if they don't have jobs where they can trade their labor for decent wages and salaries? There's been a serious lack of the long view, the wide view, in the economic planning of this nation. And I think that still we have too many CEOs are worshiping at the altar of Adam Smith, who said if you are personally greedy, somehow the entire system will move forward. And Nobel Prize winning mathematician John Nash absolutely destroyed that theory in his doctoral dissertation, but nobody wants to listen. They want a justification to go on being incredibly greedy. And that's why we have a nation now that is extraordinarily wealthy, but the wealth is concentrated in these top CEOs. And ordinary Americans are going hungry. 1/4 of Americans cannot pay their existing monthly bills. So, of course, they're not going down to the stores. They're not going down to Sears to buy whatever it is Sears is desperately trying to sell. Our economy is seriously out of synchronization. The wealth inequality has reached a crisis point. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take a few more phone calls. James in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I have a technology question, Mike. I wonder, how much do you know, how much does Israel really control the technology sector? Like, I hear that they're a powerhouse, not only a powerhouse, but a juggernaut. And how much do they feel our technology, not just in manufacturing, but in military? And how much are they really making off that when they sell it to other countries like Russia and China and whoever else wants to buy it? And also, since they do own all the tech, is that why they always get away with stuff? Because they always got all the honey traps. They know everything going on.
Well, that's a very complicated question, and certainly Israel is seen as a technology leader in the world simply because they've been taking some of that money given to them by the United States government. Then they turn around and they come in and they buy up U.S. technology companies and move them to Israel. Intel is a good example of that. And as far as the military, yes, there's a lot of spying going on. Remember, in the weeks before 9/11 happened, the FBI uncovered the largest foreign spy ring ever found operating in the United States, and was operating for Israel. And a lot of what that spy ring was doing was targeting businesses, trying to get information, proprietary secrets, and so forth. So a lot of that is definitely going on. As far as the military secrets, Israel really doesn't need to do all that much spying because they simply take the weapons they get from the United States, reverse engineer them, produce their own version, and then sell them on, sometimes to countries the U.S. government wishes they wouldn't do. But again, Israel seems able to do whatever they want without repercussion from the United States. The U.S. just goes on signing those checks. And from that, I would say that It is clear that Israel does have blackmail information on much of our government, and the biggest one of all, I think, is going to be 9/11 itself, because if you look at relations between Israel and the United States before 9/11 and afterward, it is very clear that afterward Israel got much more demanding and the U.S. government became much more submissive and cooperative. And so I think Israel's literally blackmailing the U.S. government. If you don't do what we tell you to do, then we'll tell the world who really did 9/11, and it's going to be a lot worse for you than it is for us, because the world expects Israel to do this sort of thing. It's no big deal. And so I think that may be a major area of compromise.
Well, isn't that a national security issue right there?
Of course it's a national security
issue.
Of course it's a national security issue. And again, to have our military using computer chips manufactured overseas where they can be backdoored, and now we're hearing that the reason the S-300 and S-400 missiles aren't attacking Israeli planes when they bomb Syria is because Israel has the codes to say, hey, I'm a friendly, don't launch. Yeah, it's a big, big problem. It's a wild card. It's an almost impossible to figure out factor in any coming engagement. Okay, we're going to have to let you go.
It's like the Mossad's. Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's like the Mossad agents that were captured in the white vans on 9/11.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, we got to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with some more phone calls and some more news after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines. Well, we're going to take 3 more calls, then we're going to close the phone lines because I got a bunch of news I need to get to. So, Walt in Louisiana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good.
I just wanted to know I want to know your opinion on the NDAA 2017, and since it's supposed, I believe, go into effect in maybe a month or so, I wonder what you think about, I guess, what he's going to do about that, since that's basically, I guess, overriding First Amendment and, I guess, the press in general. What's your thoughts on that?
I have not read the text of the 2017 NDAA. I obviously need to. There's just so much.
Well, I guess specifically that countering disinformation, when they're going to put together that global center, I guess, to counter quote unquote outside sources, but really it's basically going against alternative independent media.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. Well, they're cranking up, a bigger, better propaganda bureau. But they're fighting a losing battle, because any new propaganda organization by the U.S. government and the corporate media is going to run into the same credibility problem as the current corporate media and propaganda department. And all it's really going to do, it's going to have the banned in Boston effect, where it's simply going to drive people away and say, okay, there's something they don't want us to see. We need to find out what that was. Go back and look at the history of World War II, when the primary means of sharing information was shortwave, and everybody was engaged in radio jamming. In fact, that continued throughout the entire Cold War, where the Soviet Union was jamming Voice of America, and it was a real mess for anybody who was a shortwave aficionado. And that's basically what it was, trying to keep populations from finding out things the government didn't want them to know. We seem to be getting back into that same mindset. But then you find out people who were able to find ways around the jamming, or were able to set up much more directional antennas because the jamming signals were coming from a different direction from the broadcast they wanted. And in the long run, the jamming proved to not be all that effective. And I think we can sort of deduce from that it may not be all that effective now. This attempt to use corporate social media like Twitter and Facebook has resulted in people turning away from those platforms and going to other new startup social media, or even more importantly, they're starting to go peer-to-peer. People are starting to come out with peer-to-peer information sharing platforms that go back to the original spirit of the Internet, that nothing goes through a central collection point where it can be controlled. And there's no putting the genie back in the bottle on this one. We went through this same thing with Gutenberg's time. We're going through it again. The power structure, the elites want to still be in control of what you think, and they're losing their grip. In fact, you could almost tell the story of history as an ongoing battle between rulers who want to control what their populations believe versus these occasional technological leaps that change the dynamic of information flow, whether it was movable type printing, newspapers, radio, TV, telephone, and now the Internet.
Gotcha. Appreciate that.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right, we're going to switch over.
All right. Yeah.
Going to switch over to Dennis in Florida. Aloha, Dennis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. It's been a while since I called in. Those rail cars you were talking about, is that out in Hawaii or on the mainland?
Well, we have a rail system that they're trying to build here in Hawaii, and the rail cars are going to have to be replaced. The story that I was talking about, though, and it's linked on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, was how in order to replace rail cars and expand capacity on this Massachusetts rail line, they've actually hired a Chinese company that's going to come on in and set up a factory in Springfield, Massachusetts to make the cars, which is good for jobs for the people of Springfield. But the point I was making is because we have allowed manufacturing to fade for 30 years in this country, we have forgotten how to do it. In fact, those people who knew how to make manufacturing work have been lured away to other countries. And so we've lost that particular brain trust, and we need to get it back.
Are you familiar with Kawasaki manufacturing, Kawasaki rail cars?
Yes, I am.
Okay, because the same company, I think, that makes the motorcycles. I'll ask you this. What is Kawasaki rail cars, Gerald Salente, Affirmative Action, the Communist Party USA, James Comey, and me have in common?
I have no idea.
Not to mention,
you all right, Kawasaki? You all right?
We all came out of Yonkers, New York, and I firsthand saw how the federal busing and affirmative action took down the manufacturing in Yonkers, where Kawasaki rail cars was manufactured. They did a lot of rail cars for the United States. It was the site of the old Otis Elevator Company.
Mm-hmm.
The first manufacturer of the safety elevator from back in the 1800s, like around 1860, you know?
Yes.
And that's that whole thing there. I've seen it firsthand, like you say, that they've taken this all apart, you know? And it wound up, where I've seen the factories one by one. It was a big factory town back when I was growing up. Everybody worked for the Alexander Smith Carpet Mill. They worked for Otis Elevator. You know, there was a lot of jobs. Even Con Edison, Consolidated Edison, a power company. Everything was jobbed out. Everything got, farmed out, to outside, people coming in. And the corporations, that's what it is. It's the corporation, the bottom line, and that's what's killing us today.
Well, that's a big part of it, but there was another aspect, and it had to do with the aftermath of the tech boom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where because of the Apollo Moon program, all of a sudden we were in possession of these brand new technologies that allowed the creation of fabulous new products. But instead of building the factories and making those products here, I mean, some did. Texas Instruments did. Intel started here. But for the most part, the holders of those technologies simply decided, well, I've got the patent. I'm just going to sell out and retire, and I'll be very, very wealthy. And these patents to these technologies were being sought by the manufacturing giants over in Asia, Japan, China, Taiwan. And so the manufacturing and the jobs that went with it went over there. When Seymour Cray was designing the last supercomputer that he built before he passed on, he didn't even try and find any American manufacturers for large-scale integrated circuits. He went right to Japan to place the order. And that's that was a hideous mistake to spend all that taxpayer money to create this technology foundation and then just sort of sell it off to our economic competitors around the world instead of using it to relaunch a manufacturing boom in this country.
And you touched on something that Captain Austin Fitz put in her latest column. You talked about how he sent American money, taxpayer money, over to Japan, right? he talks about the two classes that are getting our money, and actually, the taxpayer is not getting any return for his investment, but the corporations and the elitists are raking it in like crazy.
Yeah.
And so it's a theft of our money from us and our wealth and our youth for the war machine and for the technology to be built elsewhere, or for the profits to go back there. You know.
Yeah, that's true, because ultimately, while the U.S. Importers, the big box stores, are making some money importing these manufactured products based on U.S. technology, the real value of a manufactured good is that manufacturing job, and those were all allowed to go to other countries. It's been a long process. Started again all the way back in 1980s. It started into a decline. And the U.S. government, rather than addressing the manufacturing decline, the U.S. government declared the service economy, which was this idea that we could prosper the nation by doing each other's laundry for a fee. And while that kind of activity increased taxation opportunities for the government, it did not bring new wealth into the country. And that's when it began to really start deteriorating. Because if you're going to, you cannot have a functioning national economy unless you have products that you can sell to other countries who want to buy those products, not arm twist them to force them to buy the products through various trade agreements and so forth and so on, which is what TPP and TTIP are all about, is forcing countries to buy our products when they don't really want to. And that's almost an admission that the government understands. We don't make anything anybody wants. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. Well, by golly, we'll wag nuclear missiles at them, and they will buy our products. Anyway, Dennis, I need to let you go. Thanks,
Mike.
Bye-bye. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. We're going to take one more phone call, and then we're going to close the phone lines for a little while. Because I'm way behind on the news points here. Dan in British Columbia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Dan, are you there? Dan once, Dan twice, Dan three times. I think we lost him. All right, getting on back to the news. So, we were talking about the economic news. We were talking about Sears on the verge of collapse, and we have seen so many retailers just going out of business. And again, it gets down to a simple reality. All of the wealth of the nation has been shoved up to the top of that pyramid. And there aren't enough of those money junkies to travel around to all the shopping malls and visit all the stores and buy all the consumer goods to keep the economy going again. You cannot have a healthy economy when ordinary people are not able to go to the stores and buy the products being manufactured and grown in, hopefully, American factories and American farms. It simply does not work. And it's very alarming to me that I hear nobody in the bowels of power, or even Wall Street, addressing this reality. Now, when the country was doing very, very well, it did so because those who were very rich did pay higher amounts of tax money. They had lower tax rates, but they still paid higher amounts of tax money, and that money would flow back down, back to the bottom, and it would feed back in. But the way the system is set up right now, it's like there's a trapdoor. Once the money goes above the level into the money junkie domain, it's not allowed to come back down here. I'm very alarmed at everybody who's screaming how increasing the minimum wage is going to be an economic disaster. We're in an economic disaster now. We need a way out. And it may be drastic. We may need to simply say, we're going to write off all the debt. We're going to write off all the debt. We're going to bring back high-paying jobs for the middle class and the working class so that they can start buying things, thereby creating manufacturing, retail jobs, and get things back on track. It seems like the oligarchs, the money junkies, are perfectly happy with the way things are, even though eventually it's going to collapse. I'm seeing all these financial experts who are saying it's going to happen this year. The money junkies, in the throes of their addiction, are going to kill the goose that has been laying them the golden eggs, and they don't see it coming. They do not see it coming. Now, if you talk to any financial expert today, they're going to tell you, get out of debt, get out of debt, get out of debt. And people can't. 1/4 of Americans can't make their monthly bills. Their rent, their food, their electricity, whatever it is that they need just to live. And they're being forced to go back on the credit cards. And that basically looks like economic activity, but it isn't. It's just more debt. You get to a point where you're borrowing off one credit card to pay another credit card, just like Greece is trying to do right now. Student loans and car loans are up 80% since 2008. Here's another article. This came out of Investment Watch blog. Inflation is not evenly distributed. The effects of inflation are felt by ordinary people. The ultra-rich with their subsidies and various other financial deals, they're protected from it. They don't feel the pain. And that is another symptom of fascism here. Here's a good question. A lot of people have been asking this. The Chicago public school system has $9 billion with a B in debt, and yet they're only servicing 381,000 students. And as a matter of fact, the Chicago public school system is trying to borrow another $900 million in the coming weeks, basically to get through the school year. Where's the money going? Where has all the money gone? Now, earlier in the week, actually it was last week, we were hearing these scare stories about how Obama's new budget was going after the poor, was going to slash food stamps, and there was a lot of scare talk out there. So the White House basically came on out. The budget director, Mick Mulvaney, came on out and said, calm some of it down. Okay? There are no cuts to Social Security or Medicare. So if you were hearing that, that was another piece of false news. A lot of false news out there. Now the FBI is saying that Comey was fooled by a phony Russian document. They're blaming everything on Russia. It's really getting insane out there. I'm seeing a lot of articles that are saying it just feels like it is starting to fall apart. It's starting to fragment. It's worried what the U.S. federal government might do in its death throes involving those nuclear weapons. Still a lot of debate over the Trump care bill. The liberals are still trying to defend Obamacare, even though it was a disaster. And they're fighting tooth and nail against Trump care. And Trump care doesn't seem to be doing much better because, as it's currently conceived, 23 million people would lose coverage. Now, Obamacare was supposed to guarantee coverage to everybody, even though it made it much more expensive at a time when people just can't afford the increase. And a lot of people are having to buy health insurance that is not Obamacare compliant and then pay that IRS fine on top of it. The mindset from the corporate government perspective seems to be just grab, 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 grab. And none of them want to open their eyes and just take a look out there and say, there is hardly anything left. And you cannot run a national economy on the top 1 or 5% just shifting the money back and forth with tremendous fury. Japanese business executives look at the United States and joke that America seems to feel that you can make money grow just by shaking it back and forth. Move it around quick, back and forth. It'll grow. Everybody will be rich. No. And again, you don't need me to tell you this. Walk down the main street of your nearby town. The retail vacancies, cracked pavement, the deteriorated paint. Walk through your town as if you were a tourist seeing it for the first time. You'll get an idea of just how much this nation has declined. And we are an empire in decline, showing all of this. And it is a tragedy, because I was born at a time when America still was great, or still believed it was great. I grew up during the space race. Boy, were we proud of that. I grew up at a time when American manufactured goods were considered the best in the world. We didn't need trade agreements to force other countries to buy our products. They were pounding on the walls saying, please, send us some more Cadillacs, send us some more Chevys. Somehow that all faded away. I keep thinking back to that wonderful HBO miniseries, Newsroom. And I do wish they would try and bring it back. And that speech by Will McAvoy in premiere episode about why America isn't great anymore. Because he absolutely hit it. Bang spot. We have to recognize there's a problem before we can start to deal with it. And there is a problem on Wall Street and in Washington, D.C. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And let's send a message to Mike in the control room. All right, so we're looking at the economic news. New home sales collapsing. U.S. bond yield forecasts are being lowered. And it looks like the recent bubble in commercial real estate may be on the verge of popping. A big part of the problem is that so much of the economy is being manipulated and manufactured to look the best without actually addressing the underlying problems, which are massive. And maybe the insiders are just aware that there isn't a fix. So they're just going to grab what they can grab while it's still going and get ready to bail. Now, all of a sudden, there is a new meme out there. As we talk about all the hungry and the homeless across the country, we talk about the 90 million Americans who cannot find any work, the shuttered factories, the retail vacancies, and all of that. Trump's Secretary of Housing and Urban Development is out there saying that poverty is mostly, it's a state of mind. You're not really poor. You just imagine you're poor, and that's your only problem. And apparently, people like Morgan Freeman are jumping on with this. Ben Carson. Poverty is just a state of mind. No, poverty is a reality. When you're going hungry, when you can't feed your family. This is more of that blame the victim mindset. Very alarming indicator. It's like the BBC telling the people of London, just get used to the bombings. What they're saying is, we can't fix the problem, just get used to the new reality. Same thing with this poverty is a state of mind. We can't fix the economy. Just get used to it. This is the new normal. And again, this is also a part of the globalist agenda. They have to drive every single nation's standard of living down to the same bottom level to make it easier to lower those borders. Okay. I'm sorry if I sound a little depressed, but I am. It's just terrible watching what's happening to this country. And it sort of reminds me of many, many years ago when my mother was succumbing to cancer, or to the cancer treatment. I'm still not really sure. And just week after week, month after month, just seeing it happen. And I'm feeling the same way watching this country, which I may have been very naive and deluded as a child. I probably was. We probably all were. But to see what's going on with this country that I was raised to love, it is very painful sometimes. All right. Let's get back on here. Over in Greece, as you know, things are really, really tense. The second attempt at a bailout has failed. Greece is hovering on the edge of default. Could cause a system-wide problem over there in the European Union. But apparently, the ex-prime minister, ex-central banker of Greece, and ex-vice president of the European Central Bank, Papademos, had an assassination attempt on him. Apparently he was in his car and he opened a letter, which turned out to be a letter bomb. He's got abdominal injuries but apparently things are getting very, very tense over there in Greece. Once again, the appeals court has ruled against Donald Trump's travel ban. The case is likely going to go to the Supreme Court. And once again, the appeals court said that it was discriminating on the basis of religion. And no, it does not. The travel ban does not specifically say Muslim travelers. It lists a series of nations that are known to be hostile to the United States, where you will have to have additional scrutiny coming to the United States. And if you are in one of those listed nations, it doesn't matter if you are Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Pastafarian, or atheist, you're going to get the same treatment. But the appeals court is still trying to claim that this is somehow racially biased, and so it's going to go to the Supreme Court. And again, the president does have the authority to exclude categories of travelers from coming to the United States of America, and other presidents have used it. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to do a couple more stories on immigration. Then we're going to take a few phone calls here. Down in Australia, they're starting to firm up their attitude about the refugees, and in particular what they're calling fake refugees. Because under international law, a refugee is somebody who is demonstrably fleeing a conflict zone. And as we have seen all across Europe, here in the United States, and apparently down in Australia, a lot of the people coming on in and claiming refugee status do not meet the definition. And so the Australian government is preparing for mass deportations of some of the refugees they have, who are causing the same kind of troubles in Australia that we're seeing all across Europe and the United States. And basically saying that anybody who does not complete this visa application by October 1st and have that visa approved will be sent back to where they came from. It's going to be a hugely expensive undertaking. But I think all of these countries are realizing that this open borders policy has gone on far enough. It is causing a tremendous amount of harm, and we know that George Soros is going to be out there trying to reverse this. But it really is Soros' fault, and that of the globalists, in that they had this vision of simply blurring all of the populations of the world together, and they did not really think it all the way through to what the possible outcomes might be at the ordinary street level. Or maybe they did and they just didn't care. You know, so some people get raped and murdered. You know, small price to pay for our dreams of a one-world government. Apparently, during the Obama administration, at least 16 members of the gang MS-13, or the Mara Salvatrucha, got into the United States. And apparently they have set up shop here. They're a very dangerous gang. Go on out. It's MS-13. They're a very, very dangerous gang. And they're building new MS-13 gangs here in the United States by recruiting young people who can't find jobs, all in the name of open borders. All right, let's take some phone calls. Keith in Cleveland, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Aloha. Yeah, this is my first time listening to your show, and I love it. Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, you keep mentioning about oligarchs, you know, that are running the show, but I have to tell you that I really have to say, let's call them what they really are. They are kleptomaniacs running a plutocracy. You know, that's
I like that.
It's a klepto-plutocracy in a way. I mean, so that's the only thing I want to say is, like, these people are mad in high positions. Look at throughout history, Nero, for example, who blamed the Christians and had a purpose and a reason to burn them on a cross throughout the city, and then he burnt down the whole city of Rome, you know, back in 65 AD, and he
Yes.
blamed it on the Christian. But the point that I'm trying to make is the Hegelian dialectic process has been going on for millennia, and it is a shame that we have to experience this, yes, but there is a battle amongst all the men and women on this planet, and it's like what Shakespeare said, you know, all the world is a stage, you know, amongst all the universe. So what you are doing is a real blessing to you, you know, to patriots and God-fearing men and women that really want truth to be divulged. And so anyways, I just want to say that there is a movement under the Earth Charter, you know, the new 10 commandments within these kleptomaniacs that they've signed in throughout the different organizations like the Trilateral Commission, you know, the Lucis Trust, which used to be called Lucifer Trust. I mean, there's so many different organizations out there. You got the Club of Rome, you know, back in the day. I mean, there's just hundreds of these different sects of secret orders, you know, that have been basically duping the public into bringing about this one world order under, you know, what was it, Alice Bailey and different Manly P. Hall and different, basically Sikhs and different mystics.
Oh,
that have
okay,
tried to bring about this new world order.
Keith,
yeah.
you're kind of like hopping all over the place here. You told our screener that you wanted to talk about manufacturing, so can we kind of get back to that point?
Okay, yeah, sure, I can totally do that. Yeah, basically, I have relatives, you know, that have, you know, I'm from the Cleveland area, and Cleveland was literally, back in the day, back in the early 1900s, we actually produced more steel in the city of Cleveland than Pittsburgh.
Yes.
You know, there was about over 100,000 workers within the steel manufacturing industry at that time. So technically, Cleveland at that one, you know, at one point in time, used to be what Silicon Valley is today.
Yes.
You know, over in San Fran. So it's like the fact that I'm trying to get to all these kleptomaniacs and bring it all together is basically they have devised this Earth Charter to bring about these the redistribution of the wealth around the world. They basically want to bring us into a second world status level, and that's what they want the whole world to be. You know, they want to impoverish the wealthy people and bring us into subjection so that we will just hook, line, and sinker fall in place for this new world order.
Well, yeah,
you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, the new world order is a return to fascism. We've had a lot of people who are saying that where basically there are going to be these ultra-rich nobles across the planet that have absolutely tyrannical control over their population, and they will simply engage in war with each other until one of them comes out on top. And I think it was just yesterday on the show I said it feels like civilization is actually moving backward rather than forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because, you know, over in South Korea, they just had an election there, and sadly, a liberal president got elected. But I used to be a missionary over there in South Korea, Christian, born-again Christian missionary. And, you know, South Korea, Seoul, Korea is like what America used to be in the 1950s.
Yes.
I mean, the women were just going out to a cafe, the women would be wearing white gloves and dressing up. I mean, people were very stately. You know, wherever you walked in Korea, it's beautiful. And then America, you know, you walk around and people are walking in their pajamas in, you know, bunny slippers.
Yeah, I know.
You know, I'm a truck driver, so I'm all over the place, but I see it. It's sad. It's like America has just come into this whole other place of, you know, losing its decade.
Yeah,
you know,
and what's even crazier is all these people in their pajamas and bunny slippers, they're taking selfies, which I think is a symptom. Anyway,
right.
Keith, I got to let you go. We're running out of time.
God bless.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to switch to Kathy in Massachusetts. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm not in Massachusetts, though, now. I've moved to Missouri, but I'm from Massachusetts because I'm really in deep culture shock. But the poverty that I'm seeing here is horrific. All right, now my housing is stable, and I'm in a great place to live, but listen, the poverty, I can't really put it into words. I may share a couple of pictures with you I've taken. But people are working for very low wages. They have I've never seen so many toothless people in my life. It's shocking. People that you wouldn't think would be toothless. Do you understand me? They've been working their entire lives, but they can't afford any health care. So I'd like Mr. Carson. I'd love to have a chat with him about right now, okay?
Yes.
I mean, he'd be better off he needs to just shut his mouth, period. That's ridiculous. There's a time to just shut your mouth and you don't say things like that. It's so unbelievable. It's like the schadenfreude thing comes to mind, like just getting off on the you know, and the power that you have over other people, you know what I mean, in a very negative way. But I've been told by a pastor recently, and he did apologize later, he's African American, and I'm white, but I find I resonate, you know what I mean, with African Americans because they've had historically been denied access to health, you know, the poverty wage,
yes.
the whole history.
Yes.
And but I'll also call, if I see, you know, some gang kind of kids on the train in Boston, I've actually confronted graciously a couple of times, like, excuse me, you know, don't do that. Like, you know, so I'm not afraid to stand up to anyone that's acting really inappropriate. But I had one of this pastor tell me a couple of months ago, well, you're going to be ignored until you die. Oh, and I had just moved here. I had been treated very, very harshly by some of the far right wingers here. You know, one of the drivers said, well, I know one thing. My husband and I, we'd never be enmeshed in the system like you are. You know, my husband's missing a kidney. He's got lesions on the other one. And if he can, you know, work, I don't know why you can't. This woman has no idea that I worked with a broken bone in a foot for a year and a half. And I'm very, very delicate. I'm more delicate than I look because, and then add to that the cost of the type 1 diabetic stuff, right?
Yes.
$10 an hour is my earning potential. So bottom line is, that was just a crushing blow. That was spoken to me bitter in front of a whole bunch of people. And I got those quiet tears after I pushed back uprightly. And I said, well, I don't really think you call that giving up, okay? So I'm not fitting in well, so we'll see what God has for me next. But I'm kind of looking at this like I'm so isolated right now, but my housing is stable, and how can you surrender that? You really can't. But I'm just seeing things that are shocking. And I don't think this person would last 10 days in this world that I'm seeing here. But the other thing, though, I was told that you're going to be ignored until you die, and I wept for I wept after I was told that. But again, it is the truth. So I'm just having to live at a much higher plane. I've never reacted. I just am gracious, and they kind of don't know what to do with that because I'm very high functioning, and I'm not sure the bitter, clannish right-wingers here quite know how to deal with me because I'm very ethical. I don't fit any of the negative stereotypes, and so it's kind of interesting. So everyone keep me in your prayers. But the other one, because I really want to make it better so that people like me can go to church or can go to events and not be looked at. The looks that I get, I mean, it's just shocking because this is the first time I've ever lived in HUD-supported housing. And my parents were airplane pilots. I didn't grow up poor, but I can't afford the health care they're deceased. I had one other thing, not to jump around, I thought of you when I saw this article. It's about PSSD and Dr. Stuart Shipko, and that would be post-SSRI sexual dysfunction. And I thought of you when I saw that because it says once people have been on this a long time, the SSRIs, that they have a hard time basically falling in love even. And it was an interesting article, and I thought of you when I saw it. And it's Dr. Stuart Shipko, Shipko.
Okay, yeah.
I thought you might want to look at that.
Okay,
But,
I'll look that up. I mean, these psychiatric medications have all kinds of adverse effects. Not all of them are violent and suicidal. But again, if you listen to those disclaimers on the advertisements for prescription medication on TV, and they'll say things in there like, you're taking this medicine, you may lose your libido, and all these other things will happen. People need to pay attention to that. People need to understand we're living in a society that is hostile to our health and happiness in the name of grabbing the last few coins out of our pockets. Anyway, Kathy, good luck where you are. I'm sorry to hear that you're going through that culture shock. I went through the same thing when my family went from farming country, New Hampshire, to Los Angeles, and there was a very hard adjustment period there. And it's worse now because we are seeing all of this intentional fanning up of racial tensions here. In fact, there's this bizarre story that was posted by a member at whatreallyhappened.com. Apparently, Hunter College is offering a course called Abolition of Whiteness that will discuss how white supremacy and violence influence individual identity. And it's just, they're fanning this up. The government literally wants to create a situation where we, the American people, are at war with each other out of their fear that we are about to unite as a single American people and say, we've had enough of this government abuse. We've had enough of the corporate abuse. We've had enough of war. We've had enough of the government spying on us. We've had enough of all of the dirty tricks. We want the country back that we were promised in that Constitution and under that Bill of Rights. Okay, one more phone call here. Frank in London. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Just wanted to say that I'm quite pleasantly surprised that since the Manchester incident, a lot of people have their own individual opinion on views on what happened. I'm surprised. I work for the local government, so you'd imagine I'm working in an open plan office. And even the people who were, were staunch believers in whatever the corporate media said somehow was wholly sacred and true, are now very doubtful of the corporate media, and they form their own opinion. I was surprised people saying, well, this is a false flag. Even they find out, they think this guy could have been duped or of committing that such a heinous crime. But yeah, I'm quite surprised. A lot of people are a lot more open-minded with information, with looking at alternative information and trying to analyze things for themselves, which I think is a pretty healthy thing that's happening in this country now.
Well, yeah, it's happening all over the world, and that's why governments and corporate media are panicking and trying to find some way that they can silence or outshout or discredit the independent media because they've lost their ability to lie to the public with impunity, and that is a tremendous loss for them because being able to lie to their population was their primary form of control, and they're afraid of that now. They're understanding that the people are waking up and just assuming that whatever's coming out of the government's mouth is a lie, whatever's coming off that TV screen is a lie, and people are taking it upon themselves to go on out and find the available facts and then decide for themselves what's going on. And so, yeah, there are definitely signs of panic in the bowels of power, and we are at a crisis point, and we might even be in the end game, where we are on the verge of a Soviet-style collapse of the United States government. And from where I sit, that would be the best possible outcome. It would put an end to all of this interventions and spheres of influence nonsense. We could all basically put down these weapons of war and go back to the business of peace through commerce, of just making things, growing things, selling to each other, living our lives, and having a little bit of peace and prosperity. And
well, I agree with you. I agree with you 100% because, I mean, I don't know what you think of this. From my perspective, I think right now what's happening, I think there is a sort of deep state war between the nationalistic oligarch, unfortunately, and the globalist oligarchs. And it seems like it's two big clubs fighting against each other, and we're the people who pushed around in the middle.
Okay, well, if any nationalistic oligarchs are listening to this broadcast, please make a donation. All right, we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Fox News is actually carrying the story of Gianforte being charged with assault up there in Montana. We talked about it earlier in the show. And then, of course, we had the caller calling on in and said, well, the reporter had it coming, and Gianforte was the... Okay. And even Fox News is saying that, yes, Gianforte's campaign tried to launch a campaign of getting on out there and trying to claim it was the reporter's fault and everything. So this show must rank pretty high on somebody's political action list here. Now then, over in California, there's a class action lawsuit against the transit police. They have been handing out a free BART Watch app for smartphones. And basically the BART Watch is that if you see criminal activity, you can immediately report it directly to the BART police. Unfortunately, it turns out these See Something, Say Something apps are allowing police to spy on everybody, including the users of the application. At least 10,000 to 50,000 people have downloaded what's called the eLerts spying app, and the lawsuit reveals transit police are using eLerts to secretly collect everyone's cell phone identification number, otherwise known as the International Mobile Equipment Identity Number. That's what goes on that little tiny chip that they put into your cell phone to make it uniquely yours and identify it to the network. So even from the Bay Area Rapid Transit, be very careful what apps you accept because there's probably more in there than you were told there was. Now, apparently there's been an article published in the New England Journal of Medicine providing the first solid evidence that marijuana can be used to treat epilepsy, which has been often anecdotally reported in the past. And apparently, in this particular case, it helped children who had a very rare form of epilepsy that couldn't be treated any other way. So it's another argument for allowing medicinal use of marijuana. Pushing back on that, though, somebody's done an economic study saying that if marijuana was legalized for medicinal purposes, it would basically result in a loss of $4 billion annually from big pharma's concocted medicines. And that is why there is such pressure to keep marijuana illegal. Once again, it's not about what's best for you, it's what's best for the corporate profits. Now, the movie Vaxxed is making headway around the world. Concern about vaccine safety is continuing to grow. And apparently down in New Zealand, they were having a theater screening of Vaxxed, and right in the middle of it, this doctor, Dr. Lance O'Sullivan, jumped up onto the stage to scream, "It's all lies, it's all fakes, it's a hoax, vaccines are wonderful, you've got to think of the children." So apparently they're feeling the pressure about that one. Finally, the Republicans in the House and Senate have introduced a bill they're calling the Back the Blue Act of 2017. Makes it virtually impossible to sue the police for bad behavior. That is a dangerous step in the wrong direction. And the bill will create new federal crimes, impose federal police over the will of local officials and voters, and shield police officers from virtually any civil liability, even in the case of egregious misconduct. This thing needs to be defeated. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, with the lovely Lady Claire here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. So until then, aloha, America.